Sejam bem-vindos a mais um vídeo do Combo Infinito, ou do Gameplays Combo Infinito, eu ainda não sei. Eu sou o Ariel, lembrando que esses são os nossos dois canais aí de videogame, né? Nós temos o Combo Infinito, nosso canal principal, e o Gameplays Combo Infinito, onde eu levo alguns gameplays. 2024 aí, tô voltando com tudo aí, com os gameplays pra vocês. Esse é o segundo vídeo da nossa série de fases perdidas do The Last of Us Parte 2 Remastered, que nós recebemos das mãos da PlayStation. Quem não viu o primeiro vídeo, corre pra ver. Tem explicação de como é algumas coisas dentro do jogo aqui. A gente tá focado aqui nos fases perdidas, que são fases apresentadas num estado pré-alfa, inacabado, e que a Naughty Dog quer que a gente veja o que eles tinham na cabeça. E aí, nessas fases, a gente já fez a The Fast in Jackson, tem alguns comentários dos diretores, dos produtores, a mesma coisa acontece no Esgoto de Seatle, que, se eu não me engano, é um ponto que não tinha no parte 2. Ou se teve, eles cortaram alguma coisa, e a gente vai ver agora, com tudo isso ligado. Inclusive, Neil Druckmann vai começar a explicar agora. Se você já está inscrito no canal, deixa o like. Se você ainda não é inscrito, se inscreve agora e deixa o like também, que a gente promete trazer mais e mais conteúdos para vocês aqui, beleza? Valeu? Vamos lá. Lembrando que o jogo sempre traz uma explicação do Neil Druckmann a respeito do cenário. Achei isso bacana.
In this second deleted level, which is an extended sequence of the sewers in Seattle. This comes on the heels of where Ellie goes into a building and she survives an attack by stalkers and gets thrown out of the window and gets swept away by the current. And then we cut this section that used to be there in the final game. Now you will get to play it. So this was a way to get a bit more interesting puzzles, interesting traversal, figure out how Ellie can navigate the sewers with the fighting current. Ultimately, with a lot of these levels and these sequences, the reason why we cut them more for pacing purposes. But here it is for you in this very kind of raw form that part of it will feel finished, parts of it will feel like assets are missing as far as audio, animation won't be final. But it's a glimpse into what a game looks like when it's months away from finishing. Enjoy.
Legal. Alguns jogos não tem tempo pra terminar, né? Eu não lembro direito o que acontece quando rola essa cena. É ali. Tem dos dois lados. Temos armas.
Onde que eu tô?
Temos armas, temos coisa pra encher vida, ou seja, vamos ter inimigo. Ok, essa é mais jogável, hein?
This level, internally known as Find Nora, was quite long in duration as we had to make Ellie traverse a far distance to the opposite side of downtown Seattle. The sewer section was originally longer than what we released the game with, approximately 10 minutes more. This was one of the few areas of the game that used water flow as part of a traversal puzzle. The players to go upstream to use the current to get to the platform to reach the other side. We mostly cut this mechanic game-wide, however it remained in essence in the section swimming to the aquarium as Ellie when you were avoiding the waves. The ladder acts as an immediate goal for the player, but being able to climb out is not going to be so easy. To keep levels interesting and engaging, we alternate between positive and negative values the player experiences. Here, it's a positive to have found the ladder, but then a negative to discover it's not the solution. But then another positive to identify the next short-term goal of the doorway. By alternating between these opposing values, we give players what they expect, but not how they expect it.
Legal.
Tá de sacanagem comigo.
Esse Lost Level aqui parece que seria legal jogar sem a...
Tem que ter outra saída.
Sem os comentários inicialmente e depois com os comentários, me parece. Mas vamos agora com os comentários. Talvez a gente fique sabendo onde vem o inimigo, essas coisas todas. Acabamos de ouvir o 1 e o 2, são 16. A gente tem que tentar usar a correnteza para poder passar. Pô, isso seria legal no jogo. Olha, dá pra ir lá.
When players reach the doorway and enter into the room, they're faced with a dead end. The real reason for this dead end room is that on the reversal, when exiting back out of the doorway, players are faced with the route onwards. A pipe that they'd not been able to see when they were swept past it on the way in, and something that was hidden from view when on the side platforms. The intention here being that the only option is to go off the standard path in order to search for a way out.
Lembrava que a gente pegava as coisas com triângulo. Eles mantiveram tudo. Será que o sistema de criação tá aqui ainda? Não lembro muito bem como é que eu criava. Claro, a gente tem que pular lá então.
Ah, me tira desse lugar, caralho. Ah.
Throughout the rest of the level, we also use light to indicate to the player that they were heading in the right direction. At each turn, however, we block the direct route forward. Players would know that they just have to keep finding alternative paths, promoting those feelings of being desperate and trapped.
Vou falando menos aí porque a explicação é toda dele. Conforme eu for tendo algum tipo de ideia, pensamento, eu vou comentando com vocês, até para vocês terem uma boa experiência.
We slowly introduce the player to consider climbing into smaller pipes and crouching in these tight spaces. This is to slowly build up to and encourage the player to climb into such a small pipe that they'd have to be crawling on their
Subindo e
stomach,
saindo.
which is something that the
É só
player
continuar
previously
subindo e
may not
sair.
have recognized as a playable space, let alone the desired route they need to take. We added a tiny space just to reward the player's exploration with a pickup item, and we made sure it was something that made sense that you'd find in this area. A canister and all the garbage that had been washed into the sewers from the surface.
Caramba, que legal. Eu não lembro como é que eu produzo as coisas, mano. Pera aí. Vamos resolver isso. Pronto, era só abrir a mochila. Vamos fazer aqui o que precisa. Ou o que der. Não dá pra fazer nada ainda. Eita, não deu nem tempo de dar pausa. Todo o sistema tá ali, né? De progressão, mas não... Nada demais. Uma coisa que eu não me lembro é se o jogo tá com Ray Tracing. Aparentemente tá. Tá sim. Esse reflexo ali em cima da água, se eu mudasse a câmera assim, ele não persistiria. Eu acho.
We love the idea of making Ellie prone through a tiny dirty pipe in order to get out, as it was a great opportunity to use our prone mechanic. A unique camera setup was created to support crawling in these pipes, as the standard prone camera is much higher above the player. We also created custom collision in order for Ellie to maneuver in these tight spaces easily. Initially, the oblong collision capsule around a character caused issues crawling around corners. We put extra effort into the custom corner collision, so the movement experience is as smooth as the main game.
Porra. Certo. Não perde
Caramba,
a
ela
cabeça, Ellie.
colocando mão nas coisas ali, vai amassando. Tipo, olha lá. Tá bem zoada ainda, né? Mas pra dizer que ela tá colocando a mão na sujeira.
In order for the player to feel cramped, claustrophobic and desperate, we'd been enforcing the traversal mechanics that allow for a tight environment which promote these feelings. We introduced the use of the squeeze through so that we can keep the player feeling enclosed and tight, but without repeating the same geometry. Here we change from low ceilings with wider walls to high ceilings and tight walls to change up the spatial pacing and keep the level from repeating itself.
Caramba, olha só, essas explicações fazem muito sentido, né, quando ele começa a falar. Em termos de level design.
Que se foda o universo. Aqui é um lugar bem merda pra morrer.
Da hora que já tava dublado, ou seja, isso era pra estar no jogo mesmo. Porque os dubladores recebem isso. Eu não acho que eles tenham dublado isso na versão remasterizada. Eu acho que eles dublaram na versão original. Eu acho, sou eu dizendo, não quer dizer que tá certo.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route entirely and turn back on themselves. So to avoid any risk of this happening in the final game, we present a lower water level so the tunnel is easy to see and commit to using. Although this isn't as impactful without the prone swim, it's the better decision as it means a smoother experience for the player with no backtracking frustration.
Ah, então a água estaria mais alta do que ali, ó. A água estaria mais alta que aquele túnel lá.
Originally, we had the waterline much higher here, so players had to swim through this tight tunnel. However, from watching user test feedback, it was occasionally causing people to discount the route. As we surface from the water and over the crest of the slope, we reveal what is further in this tunnel. A clicker that has sprouted and the fungus has grown on the sides of the pipe. It was great to see people who user tested this area becoming increasingly worried as we forced the player to squeeze past the fungus and inches away from the clicker's face, all the time not being sure whether the clicker might be alive or attack them. Although we aren't as cruel as to force a clicker attack in such close proximity, we do have a payoff for this moment. This clicker momentarily turned into Joel to show Ellie's PTSD from what happened to Joel at the start of the game.
Osh.
Ultimately, we decided to save this moment for the farm level, as it was more impactful there because it could become the centerpiece of that experience. Whereas in the sewers, we weren't able to make it as much of a narrative point and give it the breathing room and reaction time that it deserves, given the tight space.
Acho que eles podiam ter dublado isso aí, hein?
Puta merda.
Olha o clicker. Não dá pra tirar aqui. Tô louco. Oxalá. Eles mantiveram aqui pra gente ver como é que era.
Ah, merda! Ah!
For the final section, we eventually opened you out into a wider area as you traverse through such tight spaces leading up to this. So changing the environmental pacing makes it begin to feel like we're coming to the end of Ellie's ordeal. An earlier iteration used the current that we'd shown at the start for a slightly tougher traversal puzzle to conclude the sewers. The ladder was clearly visible from most of the area, but the player was faced with a fast-flowing torrent of water they come across. If the player attempted to jump into the water, they were not able to swim across the ladder due to the water's speed. But instead, they had to traverse the pipe running along the top of the space in order to get across the water.
Tá falando de uma escada que tava ali do outro lado. Deixa eu ver se isso aqui abre. Não. Aquela escada lá.
Por aqui que eu saio.
Talvez eu tenha perdido alguma das falas, hein?
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
Eu deixei passar alguma coisa. Deixa eu ver se foi dentro da água. Talvez aqui. Será que a gente pode morrer aqui? Parece que sim. Polar o 13, o que eu vi antes era o 12. Talvez esteja dentro dessa água aqui, não sei. Ué, que tá aberto. Que susto, velho. Filhos da mãe. Gostei que eles não avisaram que ia ter.
Beleza.
Quer dizer, pode ser que tenha avisado aqui. É, a gente pode morrer no Lost Level. Não, 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 não. Nunca sabe. Se o Lost Level tá pegando o meu nível de dificuldade do jogo, tá no difícil.
This is the first time we get to see stalkers that are embedded into the walls. So this optional room is a nice little early extra that the player gets if they explore. We also use the pickups to lure players over to be close enough to trigger the stalker's attack. And this caused quite a few jump scares with user testers who played our game before its release.
E mim também, filho da mãe. Que isso? Olhei pro lado, o bicho veio, mano. Eu vou ouvir de novo esse daqui que eu não prestei atenção.
Using this pipe was retained in the iteration we shipped with, as it's the last of the extreme methods Ellie has to undergo in order to escape the sewers, and what she will go through in her pursuit of revenge.
Tá. Aqui dava pra ir? Era o 14.
The last ladder climb is quite lengthy, and although we could have trimmed it down to a shorter climb, we liked how this last segment of the journey built anticipation for whether there was success at the top or not after all you've been through. Ultimately, the ladder exits out into the subway station, which is how it connects in the final game. Ellie then has to find her way to the hospital from here, crossing paths with the scars for the first time.
Ok. Gravando. Ué, e o 16? Ué, ficou faltando um. Mas, tudo bem. Deu pra gente ver qual é que é da experiência. Esse Lost Level foi mais legal. Esse Lost Level foi mais completinho, né? Do que o do Fast in Jackson. Fast in Jackson eu achei bem superficial. Esse daqui, além de dar a gameplay pra gente, né? Mostra que eles tiraram um setor aí que, na minha opinião, faria sentido ter mantido, mas eles sabem melhor do que a gente. Bom, vai faltar mais um vídeo pra gente poder ver. Vai ser o da caçada, espero que vocês estejam gostando. E voltem pra ver o próximo, beleza? Se esse vídeo saiu no Combo Infinito, depende da sua audiência pra gente poder trazer mais. Valeu, um abraço, até o próximo vídeo do Combo Infinito, do Gameplays Combo Infinito.